live.
Like that one.
I like that one. So yeah, here we are live again. We'll kind of sit here for a minute or two as people file into our virtual tasting room. It's another one of these Santa Rita Hills Wine Alliance tastings we've been doing for the last few weeks. This one with our friends Greg Brewer and Ken Brown, two living legends of the wine industry here. And we'll get started in a second here. Oh, we already got people making comments. Sonia being one of them.
Hometown advantage.
Yeah, you're right. All right, well let's get started here. Welcome to everyone who's filing in to our virtual tasting room here. This is the Santa Rita Hills Wine Alliance's series of virtual tastings with Santa Rita Hills wine producers. We've done a lot of interesting stuff over the past few weeks. We started on June 23rd with some Gruner of all things, and some Pinot and some Syrah from Fiddlehead and Camins to Dreams. On June 30th, we had Doug Margim and Bruce McGuire, also both pouring non-Pinot and Chard wines from the region, which was fun. A couple weeks ago, we had Dragonette and Liquid Farm pouring some Chard and Pinot, and then last week we had Justin Charbonneau from Temperance Cellars and Matt Kowalczyk from Buscador Wines pouring some Pinot, but then also some wines from outside of the region. So that was kind of fun as well to try out. Today, as you can see, we have our guest Greg Brewer from Brewer Clifton. Doesn't need much of an introduction, and nor does Ken Brown from Ken Brown Wines, who has been in the region since the 70s, really since the beginning of what you would call the modern wine era here, when he was hired to run Zacca Mesa and then went on to start Byron and then his own brand, and was involved in a lot of stuff along the way. We're going to get into their histories today. We're going to taste some fun wines that they are pouring for us all virtually. And then just to tell you about some other upcoming stuff, next week we have a fun one. We have the Faciega Vineyards Showcase. So we have Rick Longoria from Longoria Wines, obviously. We have Adam Tolmack from the Ojai Vineyard. And we have Billy Watson from Foxen Winery. And they are pouring two vintages each of their Faciega Vineyard wines. So that should be fun, a real kind of deep dive into a specific site. We're going to take a week off August 4th because I'm going to be out of town and some other people are going to be out of town. And then August 11th, we're going to come back with an Almarosa showcase, and hopefully we'll be talking to Richard Sanford and some other people about that. And then we're going to actually keep this thing going. You know, when this was started, it was kind of a lead up to Wine and Fire. And as we know, our current pandemic situation has not opened up to let us have events like that. So we're going to actually keep these tastings going through most of the rest of the year, it seems like. So we'll be doing it probably every other week rather than every week, but should be fun. And we're going to start lining up all those people real soon. I need to actually start doing that this week. So there'll be a lot more fun to come. So today we have 4 wines. We have a Pinot Noir, Santa Rita Hills Pinot Noir appellation blend from Brewer Clifton 2017. We have Ken Brown has brought us 2 wines. One is his 2017 from Rancho La Vina Vineyard, obviously in the Santa Rita Hills, and then his 2016 from Rita's Crown Vineyard, also in the Santa Rita Hills. And then we're going to finish today on a white wine, which is something that if you go to a lot of high-end wine tastings, people do that all the time. They actually like to finish on their Chardonnay. Happens a lot in Burgundy. And so we're going to be doing that too. We're going to finish on Greg on the Brewer Clifton, the Santa Rita Hills Chardonnay blend as well. So, but to dive in, let's start with Greg. I mean, Ken has a little bit more history, but we're going to get into his history. And so, but let's start with Greg and try this 2017 Santa Rita Hills appellation blend. Always a delicious wine and a taste of the entire appellation. But before we even do that, I mean, you feel free to drink at home, obviously. But Greg, tell us a little bit about your history and how you got into wine here, and then how you specifically really dialed into the Santa Rita Hills and became such a champion for the region.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thanks so much for this opportunity and the alliance, and to share this screen with Ken is really an honor. It's also cool. This is my 30th year in the county. And it's also fun being like an up and comer when I'm with Ken Brown. So it's really, it's really pretty awesome. And I mean that with the most respect. And I say that because, I started off as a French instructor at UC Santa Barbara. I happened to get a part-time job at Santa Barbara Winery when I was barely 21. And, immediately fell in love with the wine and food industry. And so that's how I got into it. Fortunately for me, Santa Barbara Winery's vineyards are in what would become the Santa Rita Hills, right? So professionally speaking, I was born here, right? And I've dedicated 3 decades of my life to this stretch, really this one highway in particular, but, the whole corridor of Santa Rita Hills. But I think, there's so many things that inspired me early on, right? And it was barrels and spider webs and classical music and free crackers on the bar and cool people coming in and all that. But far more importantly, it was the people, right? And I remember, back then, the real pioneers in the area were the ones that were just so kind, and they had such cool stories, and they were so engaging and motivated and into it, so. We were talking about Bruno earlier, and Brian Babcock and Bruce, and Bert Williams and Clendenin and Lindquist and Adam Tolman. I mean, that squad, several of whom were trained by Ken. And I remember it was early on in my tasting room years, and the spirit in the county was really. I mean, it's still really good. Don't get me wrong, but there are a lot of people now, and I think it was a lot more like exploratory and new in that kind of energy then. And I remember. Saving up money. I made $6 an hour in the tasting room, but I remember, saving up money and, and driving my way up to the old Byron building, the old Byron winery, and, going to the tasting room and those cool labels with the triangles on them for the reserve wine, and, saving up and buying a 6-pack or a case, which was like a couple days work, but cherishing those wines and studying those wines and reading about those wines. And it was really, that's what motivated me, in the county. And then thinking about Santa Maria, a lot of it I felt was done in such a beautiful way, right? There was Au Bon Climat, had a very significant flag there, Byron, of course, others, the Foxen. And Santa Rita Hills still felt, of course, there's Sanford and Benedict and Babcock and Santa Barbara Winery, but it was still a little bit unknown, right? It was still kind of like a little secret spot that not as many people were aware of. And I also felt comfortable within the landscape. I think I'm an LA kid, right? And I didn't even know seasons existed before I got in this business. And so there's something, Santa Maria is beautiful and the fruit is stunning and it's vast. I mean, you feel the scale of Santa Maria agriculturally, right? And it's still a little bit intimidating to me, to be honest. And I think in Santa Rita, it feels more intimate. Right, it's nothing to do with quality. Don't get me wrong, and nothing qualitative at all. It's kind of like Cote de Nuit, Cote de Beaune, or Serena and Venus Williams, or Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen. I mean, they're different successful siblings, yet there's like a small, manageable feel in Santa Rita, and that was very attractive to me. And so that's really when Steve and I elected to, devote our careers to it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, Santa Maria Valley opens quite wide, and there is still tons of, on the valley floor, tons of that bigger, massive agriculture there. And Santa Rita Hills is much more of a winding, kind of tight series of corridors, essentially. And we're tasting your appellation blend, but you were also one of the first guys to really champion single vineyards as well, right? I mean, it was at that time there was a lot more. Appellation blend was kind of what people did, right? I mean, you blended different vineyards and put them together, although there weren't all that many vineyards as compared to now, obviously. But you were kind of one of the first to say, hey, I like this wine in the barrel just from this one vineyard. Let's stick with that, right?
Yeah. So, when we started, there was a lot of blending going on. And then all the really sexy sought after wines were block specific or vineyard specific. So, Chris Woodcraft with N and Q and all of the stuff that Jim was doing and the Foxen, so, and then Bert Williams, I was very fortunate to spend a lot of time with Bert, and, Brewer Clifton is essentially almost like playing a cover tune of William Sellium, but down in Santa Barbara. We kind of riffed off of that model a little bit as far as, raising all the wines the same, really without bias or prejudice, and just letting them be what they are. And the vineyard specific model, And that, that worked great. And, that certainly propelled us to a certain thing. It was nothing new by any stretch. I mean, it was even being done locally, pretty prevalently then. We just did it, and, we did it our way. We didn't do any blends. I guess that was maybe something that separated us. And then, fast forward to 2007, it was like our 12th vintage, I guess, at that point. And, our state vineyards were starting to filter in, and we kind of just had this realization, Steve and I did, where, we were kind of thinking all we've done is told a deconstructed voice of this appellation, right? It's like we've only shown the individual instruments. And we thought, you know what? It was really Steve's idea. It was like, let's assemble these and let's tell a more complete voice of place. And that's what gave birth to Santa Rita Hills. And really, it's 90+% of what we do. It's not a declassification. We don't blend that way. It's simply our best foot forward. Because if you think about it, to put your name on a label is one thing, right? If you fail or do something lame, you only have yourself to look at in the mirror, right? If you put a vineyard's name on a label, then you're carrying that importance and that responsibility of the place. Yeah, and that's very, very important to me. Like the Machado that we do, for example, I'm carrying the Machado family's legacy, right? That's a huge responsibility, and I love it. It's an honor. When you put your whole neighborhood's name on a label, you're carrying the whole weight of the neighborhood. Like that wine needs to be a door opener for others. It needs to be ambassadorial for others. And I've always, we've really, really loved it. And now, these are the two wines that I love putting front and center. I mean, most markets only have these two wines, and I love that,
Right. And what do you is there something you try to do with the appellation blend that maybe you don't do with the single vineyard blends? I mean, are you trying to have consistency vintage to vintage? Are you trying to showcase the vintage, or what are you trying to highlight?
It's all just Brewer Clifton 101. It's all the same that we've always done. So a lot of whole cluster, if not complete whole cluster fermenting, long time in fermenter, and then it's aged in barrels that are 15 to 25 years old, and that's it. I mean, you barely need electricity. I mean, it's really straightforward. And relying on the intensity and the sensuality and the beauty of Santa Rita fruit, and then kind of corseting it by the stem inclusion, right? To kind of prop up the fruit a little bit, offer a little spice aromatically, and then that tea-like infrastructure of tannin on the palate to kind of substantiate the wine from the inside out, right? Relying on the stems that are there, kind of like cooking a protein with a skeleton. I mean, that's always been the kind of the energy and emotion behind the reason for doing whole cluster.
Mm-hmm. And then what is the market, I know, has been really excited about single vineyard wines. It's kind of a story that's translatable. You can kind of tell you're talking about a singular space versus appellation wines. I mean, which I should say at the same time, sometimes I'll taste vintages of certain producers, not necessarily you guys, but like sometimes the appellation wines, even though they're a little cheaper, are better than the single vineyard wines. There's like almost a more complete picture sometimes. What's your sense of how consumers look at that? Are they down for the appellation wines? Do they want the single vineyard more? What is the kind of formula there?
I mean, I think there's certainly an understanding of it, and I think now there are plenty of examples of those that are in whatever field it is, right, that are going for it on that kind of scale, and yeah, it's like, is it a quartet or a solo? Is it an orchestra or a solo? It's the same kind of thing, and that resonates with people. And so, I think the complete nature of it makes sense, for what we're doing. And, I think about like some of the best, growers in Champagne or whatever, the really specific kind of bling cuvées, they are what they are, right? And hopefully they take huge risk, and they're hopefully more polarizing even. Otherwise, why do them, right? But those producers that year in and year out deliver, for like Rotorua Estate sparkling wine is the best example, right? Up in the Anderson Valley. I mean, those wines that are like year over year, just killing it. And they're very unique. They're specific to the appellation, and they're available. I think it's very, very important to me. And I think it will be increasingly important in the years to come, especially on the whole
having wines that you can actually get your hands on, basically.
Yeah, and maybe a little more reachable price point and everything else. Yeah, but I think that, and that's just a testament to people's systems, right? And like the complete kind of voice of what a project is up to.
Right. Great. Well, this is a tasty wine, as always. It's fairly light in color, but not light in flavor or texture or anything else. So, these are some of those wines that I always find that it's, I said this on some other shows, but like, you know, it's lighter, brighter, but also tons of depth, and it's just disappears. It's one of those wines you open, especially with a little chill to it. You open it, and then, you know, 20 minutes later, like, what happened to that wine? Like, oh, we drank it all.
Oh, no. Nice at Kettmann's house.
All right, well, let's move to Ken and talk about some of these single vineyard wines now that we covered some of the appellation stuff. Ken, let's start with your 2017, you think? Let's go
Yes.
newer to older. So we have this wine, which is the 2017 Rancho La Vina, Santa Rita Hills Pinot Noir. You were reminding me today that I gave this a pretty big score, 94. You were saying I probably gave maybe 94 to Greg's too. I don't know.
Was it a 98?
It was
always been a little conservative, Matty, but you know.
Thank you, though.
Yeah. So let's talk about this one. Let's talk about your past too, how you decided to come to Santa Barbara. I mean, you're from Sacramento. You have a history up there, Davis and all that, but then you kind of, you know, were a vanguard by coming down here and bucking all your NorCal friends and setting roots down here.
Yeah, outside of Davis, that's on somebody else's resume. Actually, I chose not to go to Davis.
Oh, that's right. You went to Fresno State.
I went to Fresno State, and Fresno State is a much more practical, hands-on. If you're in the VIT program, which I was in both viticulture and enology with, nobody at that time. This is in, I don't know, 70s, early 70s. You either did viticulture or enology. And I almost felt like to do both of them, I had to do a low crawl. The two buildings were about 100 feet apart, but to go from one to the other is like, Ken, I thought you were doing viticulture. No, I do both. Oh, how can you do that? But my concept has always been a wine growing concept. You know, the whole process starts when you plant the vineyard and choose the right site and the road direction, rootstock, cross, and all that. And it ends when, like in this situation, the Rancho La Vina, when this last bottle is consumed. So it's the overall process. And that's why I chose to go to Fresno State. You know, what a lot of people will do is work with one winemaker and you get one set of parameters. And then it's kind of hard to break away from that because you were trained in that set. So when I went to Fresno, my background is business administration with specialized finance, which turned out to be a really good choice as I look back on that decision. But the Fresno experience really turned out to be extremely important because it gave me then some background. That's one of the reasons I went there was chemistry and microbiology, and I took all the viticulture and enology classes. So
if I could jump in real quick, Ken, why was it so divided between vit and enology? It just wasn't.
It's hard to say. That's the way it was.
Yeah.
You know, the vit guys were different from the enology guys. The vit guys were more of the farmers, the ranchers, that type, and the enologists, whatever. But
scientists type.
A little bit different, and the school was set up so that the two programs were totally different. They never ever really got together and combined anything. So I was kind of the arbitrator there, and I'd kind of do both. And ended up. I thought was an important point here is running the school winery and also doing research projects both in the vineyard and the winery. So it gave me a lot of background, met a lot of people. But really what catapulted me to be in this area is one of the first research assignments I had in the enology program was to work with some of the first vineyards in Santa Barbara County to see if there was, are you ready for this, commercial potential for Santa Barbara County wines. I think we've done okay so far. But anyway, so the first wines, we took 4 wines and worked with these early vineyards. It was Riesling, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Cabernet. And in the first couple of years, this is first crop, the Rieslings were incredible, and they still are to this day. You can sell them in your taste room, but that's about it. And the Chardonnay, the early Chardonnays were phenomenal. And much to my surprise, and I'd always been about Pinot Noir. I knew I was going to be a Pinot Noir winemaker from before I even, went to Fresno State. The Pinots really, surprisingly, for young crop, really showed a lot of potential, and I was stoked. I go, oh man, this looks good here. The Cabernet, it didn't disappoint me a lot because I'm not a cab guy. They were terrible. The early Cabernets. It just, I'm sure, I know Greg knows, but Matt, you've tasted them. There were some awful Cabernets because we hadn't figured out where to grow them yet. We didn't realize how really cold Santa Maria and Santa Rita Hills was. So we planted a lot of Cabernet in Santa Maria Valley because Cabernet was the grape varietal that, as a winery or as an appellation, would give you a recognition. So it was important to do that. Pinot Noir just wasn't a factor in those days. But anyway, so that when ending up making those wines, Marshall Ream, who was the vice president, had retired of Atlantic Richfield, and some of his other buddies put together Zaca Mesa Winery. And I'd been making wines for Zaca Mesa in this research program. And I'll never forget the day that Marshall, we were out in the vineyard. He said, Ken, let's go up on this reservoir. And I want to talk to you a little bit. And I said, oh, okay. Walked up to the reservoir and sat down and started talking. He said, I've been thinking, we want to start a winery, and I'm just wondering if you'd be interested in being our winemaker. And it's kind of like, oh, okay. So needless to say, I didn't say no. But there was such the moment. And I was thinking, well, if this doesn't work out, then, I'll pull my stakes and go up to Sonoma and whatever, do something up there. But I tell you, just every year, it's just we keep learning more and more about each one of these unique little subclimates and so forth in both Santa Maria and Santa Rita Hills. So, it's great.
And you were just to butt in, you were the head professor of Zaca Mesa U, essentially, right? I mean, you.
Well, yeah. So at Zaca Mesa, when we had to, so Zaca Mesa, I'll say, started making their first wines at Monterey Vineyards. And then when I came in 77, I headed up finishing off those wines, but we had to bottle the 77 Zaca Mesa wines that were made at Monterey Vineyards. Well, this goes way back. And good old Fred Brander then had San Ynez Valley Winery, where Calara is now. And he there weren't a lot of us then, so he and I were good friends. And I said, hey, I've got to bottle these wines. Could you help us do it? And he said, sure, So I said, we're going to need some help here. Do you have any names? And so the first one on the list was this guy named Jim Clinton, and he works in Ventura for Firestone Tire Company. And there's this guy, that guy. So I hired Jim and a couple other people, and it was just, it's one of those moments that you really see how people respond from, getting into an environment, if it's winemaking they love or another environment that they love. You could tell, you could sense that they really get excited about it. And Jim got excited. And then I will say that anytime I've ever hired somebody, I'm not looking, I don't, I'll ask for their resume, but I don't really look at it. What I want to see is when we talk about winemaking and grape growing, that type of thing, I want to see the excitement, the enthusiasm. They raise up in their seat and they kind of levitate. That's the person I want to hire. So getting back to your point, that the people that we brought into Zaca Mesa in the early days were really passionate about wine. They didn't know a lot. So it was just kind of a good situation where, we had some experience by now making wine and kept people that were really excited about it. So, I really feel privileged to have been in that position and to venture to a lot of people that have.
When did single vineyard things start getting more, interesting and something that you pursued? I mean, was there single? Are you getting an echo? I'm hearing an echo.
It might be.
Let me take this off and see if this works.
So actually, at Zaca Mesa, we didn't do much single vineyard. So we made a. Oh, wow. No, I'm getting it. I'm here. Okay. I don't know. I think we're having technical. Do I need to do anything? Hello? Oh, wait.
Is that?
Yeah. It's really weird. Greg, can you hear this kind of?
Yeah, but now it's gone away. Now you sound great. I think we're
Okay.
through it. Yeah.
Okay. Aliens just left. That's good. Oh, no, they're back. Oh, no. Okay. So anyway, make it short. So that it's called University of Zaca Mesa because there were a lot of people there that went on and were able to start their own brands or become the winemaker, for the.
When I kicked off, and when you started there.
Yeah, I can't hear you now. There's so much vibration even.
No.
Am I hearing the vibration?
Fine.
Yeah, I think it's on Matt, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. So let's move forward. We go from Zaca Mesa to Byron. Actually, I built Byron Winery on Tepisque Road in San Luis Valley to primarily be overflow for Zaca Mesa, which was nice because they helped fund that project and paid me at the same time. I was still their winemaker. It was a great way to start. And then I was able to grow the Ken Brown brand. So we started Byron in 1984. The first, so that was our first vintage. And we started off fairly small. And then Zaca Mesa just kind of, the wheels started falling off the cart. They'd gotten up to about 90,000 case production. So then they didn't need that excess capacity, so they pulled back. So that gave me the opportunity to kind of ramp up the Byron brand. And then, so in a couple of years later, then I stepped down as the Zaca Mesa winemaker, but they knew what I was doing because I was doing it for them. So there weren't any issues between, when I started the Byron brand. So the Byron brand got off to a really good start. We were focusing, actually the first vintage, we made more Cabernet than Pinot because that's kind of where the market was. And we actually, there were little pockets of Cabernet that were decent. But anyway, so then we quickly, I hate, there's so many people using the word pivoted to, Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And then that's when we started doing vineyard designates. We did Sierra Madre, we did some Bien Nacido. And then at Byron, we had what we called like Monument Hill and some special names for special parts of the Byron / Nielsen vineyard. So that what we called then the Byron vineyard was actually my partnership purchased the Nielsen vineyard, which is the oldest commercial vineyard in Santa Barbara County. So it's definitely a historical landmark. That was planted in 1964. So we bought it a couple of years after we started the Byron Winery, and then we were fixed because we had really good grape supply. One of my partners, as Matt knows, was Dale Hampton. And of course, Dale was the vineyard manager for some of the best vineyards in San Luis Valley. So that I was the winemaker and Dale and I had this vineyard, it was kind of handy to have the grape supply. And then we had a couple partners that were kind of silent partners, but really enthusiastic about wine and helped fund the project. So it was kind of a nice project. Then we sold Byron Winery to the Mondavi family in 1990. We didn't have to sell, they didn't have to buy. But Mondavi's wanted to get a foothold. Tim had started working with some of the Chardonnay for their Woodbridge project, and he really fell in love with it. So that worked out really well. And then once we did that, then we had, let's say, it sold in 1990. Mondavi went public in 93. So it was really, those 93 on to about 90 to 2000 were really great years. And then the dot-com crash hit, and then all bets are off because you're a public company. So things got pretty bad. And one day I was talking to Tim and said, Tim, I'm not enjoying this too much anymore because the CEO and so forth was telling the family kind of what they needed to do to cut costs and so forth. And of course, Tim's going ballistic, and I'm going, I'm not doing that. So there was kind of that friction that happened. And I just felt, rather than living through that, I just decided, hey, I'm going to start another one. That's when we started Ken Brown brand. So I actually started in 2003 at Byron Winery. And then the last vintage there was 2004. Left then because once I started selling the Ken Brown wines integrated with the Madavis, that I'd step down because I was the front man for Byron. You can't wear that hat that you can rotate. So anyway, here we are, Ken Brown. Now we started off at about with Ken Brown brand. We started off at a little over 4,000 cases, and everybody kind of likes to brag about how much they've grown. I like to brag about how much we've reduced size because I wanted to. Originally, we were doing a lot of distribution, selling out of state. So having been, with Mondavi and seeing kind of how distribution sales and the costs that you have to put in to support out of state, especially, is I just figured that we'd be better off. We just cut all out of state wholesale, and now we do about 2,500 cases to 3,000, 70% direct. 30% wholesale. We're all California with Wine Warehouse. Have a great team to support us at the Wine Warehouse. So it's a nice little brand. It's just my wife and myself. We don't have partners, so wake up every morning and feel good about it. So
tell us about this wine and your kind of exploration of the different vineyards of the Santa Rita Hills.
Okay, so that's the reason I wanted to do this. So Rancho La Vina is kind of in the epicenter of what I think of Santa Rita Hills. We're on the south side of the appellation. Of course, these are transverse valleys running, and they are two valleys that run east-west. So the south side is the valley that the Santa Rosa Road is on, also the river. And if you're on Santa Rosa Road and you're leaving, like where Rio Vista is, and now there's Peak Vineyard and Winery, then you get to a couple wineries, but fairly soon you get to Sanford Benedict. And Sanford Benedict was the first real, pioneer of Pinot Noir in Santa Rita Hills. So we work with Sanford Benedict. Then we work with La Rinconada, a little bit more with Chardonnay than Pinot, and then we skip right over that. And the next vineyard is La Encantada, and then it's Rancho La Vina, and then as you go further west, we work with Radian. We don't work with Pet Rock. But what you see is this huge difference in the wine, the color, the character, aromatics, and flavor. And part of that is the big change in climate when you go from the east end to further west. But there's also a huge difference in soil. And the Sanford and Benedict Pinot, which we didn't bring today, is very dark and rich and dense, because it has more clay, and that's kind of the Botella series of soil. But right next to it, basically, is La Encantada and Rancho La Vina, which have a little bit lighter soils. They're kind of loamy and some sand in them. So you're going to get these more gentle wines. I think, to me, they're a little bit more old world in a positive way. They're not as structured. And as you go further west, you're getting colder, you're going to see more structure, more color in the wine. It doesn't mean they're better or worse, they're just different. So what my goal was to work with the best vineyards for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and also Syrah, which we do a little bit of, and to showcase the difference between these vineyards. And the vineyards I'm working with, they're all really good quality every year, but they're all different. We can line them all up in our tasting room, and each one is so different. They're unique. To me, that's really exciting. That is such a unique characteristic of what Pinot Noir is about. It's all about being able to really express that site. So you better have everything dialed in if you really want to make a good Pinot. So anyway, so Rancho La Vina, this is all clone 115, and it's just a real consistent vineyard for us every year. It's a very user-friendly type of Pinot Noir. We don't try to overmake it. This is some years a little bit darker. This happens to be a little bit darker year, but we still want to maintain that earthiness and a little bit of that brown spice. I think this does a good job of it.
Right. And then the other one you had for us is the 2016 Rita's Crown, which is a completely different vineyard on the top of a mountain.
It's interesting though. If you look at a map of Santa Rita Hills, we always think east-west because that's the way the valleys run. But if you were to take they say a cut through the middle and if you look at kind of the distance from equidistance from the ocean, something like Long Cantata is the same distance from the ocean as Rita's Crown, but one's lower elevation. Rita's Crown is on the very top, so it's really windy. The soil is a lot different. There's a lot of calcareous soil in there, so you can get in the Rita's Crown, which I'm going to pour right now. But just comparing these two, and it's unfortunate. I know a lot of people that are viewing us didn't have the opportunity to get these wines, but some of you I know have tried these before. But Rita's Crown is just so different than Long Cantata. Sanford Benedict is so different than these two. We do Radiant, so different than all the others, and so that's kind of what we're doing, is just taking all these children of Santa Rita Hills and kind of put them in a line and saying, here's what we got. So, anyway.
And Greg, do you do much on the south side of the appellation as far as vineyards go, or are you mostly on that 246 corridor?
No, I've worked with almost everything in the area. And, we farmed Mount Carmel for about almost 10 years. And so, I certainly have played on that side a lot. And I think I've just, for different reasons, like geographic reasons, really, I've found myself, settling into the Highway 246 corridor, and it's not, they're both cool. And I love seeing them kind of more collective than separate, just as far as the messaging of the appellation and keeping it very cohesive and inclusive. And it's kind of just a high plane, behind the hills. The elevation's higher, the soils are a bit lighter typically. Mm-hmm. But I've settled in this stretch, I think, much like someone would settle in a neighborhood in New York or Manhattan, right? Like you're here, I was in Melville for 20 years, and then DC was here, and then we started farming out here, and then like you stay in your little borough, you know what I mean? And I love everything within the whole appellation, of course, but I think that's kind of why I've, kind of anchored in next to Brian.
There's been it's not like a major push, but every so often people suggest that the appellation should be in smaller sub-appellations. Is there an advantage to that in any of your minds? Obviously soils are different, the sides are different. I mean, what's your...
Yeah, I think for the next couple of generations, I think it would do it a huge disservice. And I would fight it for as long as I'm around. I think there's a risk of over appellating things, right? Yeah. And too much too soon. And sure, you can make an argument to make it different, great, but I think, part of when we mapped the appellation in 97, it was an opportunity to be very, very finite with the message of what we were doing, right? So back in the late 80s and 90s, it was like Santa Barbara, come one, come all. You like Riesling, we got it. You want Cabernet, great. Want some Zin, we got that too. It was like a buffet. And I think it was incumbent upon the appellation and the alliance to make it very, very crystal clear that Santa Rita Hills, sure, Riesling can be great out there. Syrah can be great out there. A lot of things can be. A lot of things can work beautifully out there. And our core message is Chardonnay and Pinot. And I think similarly, keeping Santa Rita Hills as a singular thing that people can get their head around is really, really important. And it's only been 20 plus years, right? So, I think slicing and dicing now would really set us back.
And it's been a huge success story of the region. Go ahead, Ken.
I was just saying, I agree with that. If you wanted to, which we're not saying we do, but I must see 4 sub-appellations. Greg, see if you agree that the difference between the north side of the appellation and the south side tends to be quite different in soil, where the north side tends to have a little more sandy loam type of soil. South side tends to have a little bit more clay, firmer soil. So I think you generally see more structure on the south side and the north side. And then you could also divide it the other way, maybe someplace around Sanford Benedict, where the further west you go, it's going to get colder, you get darker wines, more structure and that type of thing. Go further east, lighter color, but more the spice and old world kind of tip. So sure.
I mean, you can certainly justify a difference, but the question is why, right? So there's where you guys live, and you could flip UCSB and have that a different town or different, but why?
I'm not advocating.
But the inclusive nature of that? You know what I mean? Or, be it Montecito, could Montecito be divided into 4 different boroughs? Sure, but why? You know what I mean? And so I can't even name the appellations and, Paso Robles. And maybe that's my bad and I'm naive, but there's a point of overcomplicating and over-confusing.
Even in Santa Barbara County, we have to stop and think now.
So anyway, that's why I feel pretty strongly, obviously, but that's how I want to keep it intact.
Much stronger argument to say that we should be putting Santa Barbara on every bottle, no matter which appellations it's from.
And that's a point too. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Great.
Alrighty.
Ken, these wines are fantastic. I definitely sense a bit more structure in the Rita's Crown. Like there's just a little more, I think, structure just from that wind beating those grapes and strengthening that skin and translating to the wine. And do you think age-wise, do you think the Rita's Crown would be a better bet than the Rancho La Vina, or
a better bet for what? Aging? Aging. In this case, I think so.
Mm-hmm.
The Rita's Crown, because of the extreme, the wind and the soil, the berries tend to be pretty small. So just by that nature, you get some pretty good density. But there's, to me, there's a lot of richness. So the tannin structure around are softer tannins, even though there's quite a bit of tannin. So kind of in the popularity contest in the tasting room, the Rita's Crown, day in and day out, we end up selling more of it than any of the others. So I kind of go, okay. But then when I'm tasting with the gatekeepers, when we're doing our wholesale tours, then the knowledgeable buyers will tend to lean toward kind of interesting Long Cantata and Radiant. And they're just not for the mainstream, but they've got so much going on. You kind of have to really, let the wine get a hold of you. So it's kind of what the Psalms will do and that type of thing. So, it's kind of nice to have all those possibilities for you. Yeah.
It's nice that they're all good. I think that's a bonus.
I'll tell you, I always look at it this way. If anybody's making bad wines in Santa Rita Hills or Santa Barbara County, they screw it up because the grapes overall are really good. So kind of keep that focus in mind.
Cool. Well, let's finish on some Chardonnay. We have Greg's, the Brewer Clifton 2017 Santa Rita Hills blend. And Greg, you've been making Chardonnay long time. So tell us about this one.
Yeah, wild. I love Chardonnay. It's really, the Chardonnay and Pinot as being siblings, in as far as voices of place. I love the transparency of Chardonnay. I love Santa Rita Hills Chardonnay in particular, and how it typically delivers like a lemon, lime, salt, margarita-esque condiment, for food. It cleanses, it lifts, and I think it really is vehicular to kind of bring the oceanic landscape through the wine. Yeah, and I think it's the seasonality that we have. It's the plankton, the sand, and the soil. There's something very beachy and marine-like, and almost kelpy in some ways about the Chardonnay out here.
That's really nice.
And I've always loved it. And so an approach here too is the same as always. So all the vineyards in our estate are raised without any bias or prejudice, the exact same. And then, they come in at night, press, down to super old barrels. Barrel age, again, is 15 to 25 years old. No lees disturbance, really not much mallow, bottled after 10 months. I mean, it's very, very straightforward. But I think, for me, an ocean is both kind of serene and savage, right? There's something, you could be walking with, a significant other and, holding hands with balloons and cotton candy and watching the sunset and the dolphins, and it can be very calming. And also similarly, especially Point Conception, it's rugged and scary. It's a different animal out there. And I think hopefully these wines have that, they're transmitting that, right? There's something very composed and confident in the wines. And there's also something that cuts pretty hard, and Ken touched on, the Santa Barbara and how it's just a blessing to make wine here, to grow things here, because of the confidence in the landscape. It gives all of us the opportunity to be very, very vulnerable with the upbringing of the wines, right? There's no need to compensate. There's no need to overcome. It's simply a matter of harnessing what's already there. And so hopefully that was accomplished with that wine, all these wines.
Very nice. Greg, did you say it's full mallow?
No, hardly any.
Hardly any, okay.
Yeah, mm-hmm. And no stirring. Yeah, very straightforward.
And especially when you go to the coast of, I was up at the Guadalupe Dunes, essentially that coastline is pretty similar from Point Conception north to Pismo. And it's beautiful to walk on the beach, but if you get near that water, you just might die because it's a raging ocean.
No, there's something threatening about it, like beautifully threatening about it, like Surf Beach and Jalama and Conception and Guadalupe. I mean, it's not like Miramar, Biltmore, Bahara. It's a different animal up here, and I think, and I love that, and I love kind of channeling that through these wines, and that spirit pulsing through these wines. And again, with food, they're amazing. You think about lemon, lime, and salt. You see them on mise en place at a bar. You see them at the pass at the kitchen. I mean, it makes food taste more like the food itself. It just lifts, it cleanses, and that drying kind of pithy, saline feeling, on the mouth right now is telltale Santa Rita. And it's always drawn me in.
Is there? I just make a quick comment that we tend to talk about the Pinot Noir of Santa Rita Hills. I know that, and I'm sure you're one of those. There are a few of us that don't put one above the other. I think the Chardonnays are really outstanding, and so are the Pinots. But to have one appellation that can deal so successfully to have the climate of soil, to be able to make both wines, because you don't really have much success with making both wines in the same region, Burgundy. Somehow we were able to do that in the same zone. And that the saltiness, the minerality, the lemon custard, those type of things are really characteristic of Santa Rita Hills.
And I've heard a lot of smart established winemakers suggest that Chardonnay, if you fast forward 100 and 200 years, like we're going to be known for Chardonnay more than Pinot, perhaps. So.
Yeah, that's true.
We're going to be known for you, Matt Kettmann.
Oh yeah, there we go. Cool. Well, this is great tasting. We've covered all the bases, I think. Anything you guys have to add that we have not gone over here? Well, actually, is there anything about making appellation blend Chardonnays versus Pinot Noirs that's different? Like when you're making a single vineyard Chard versus a appellation, is pretty much kind of the same.
No, we view it all the same. It's just
you mean that from a philosophy standpoint?
Yeah, it's all the same.
Yeah, great. All right, Ken, any last parting comments here? Or?
Well, I'd just like to thank Matt, you doing this for us. I'm going to certainly miss the Wine and Fire event that we've held every year. Not this year. That's my favorite tasting of all. So I hope these satisfy everybody, and we'll hope to see you next year at the Parisian Mission there. Do our thing.
I remember going to, I don't know if it was the first Wine and Fire, but it was that one where Sanford was feted because Omarosa had just come out, and there was a dinner in the Mission, candlelight, New West catering, and it was one of those.
Yeah, 2005. Yeah, it was really
very special.
Yeah.
One day again.
Thanks for the opportunity, both of you. It was fun.
Thank you, guys. And thank you all for watching. Tune in next week for the Faith Diego Vineyard Showcase. That should be fun. And then in a couple of weeks for Omarosa. And then after that, we'll see you every other week for a while. Not too long. Hopefully we get back to some semblance of normal in the nearish future. But I think we'll be doing this for at least a few more months. So hope everyone is well. I hope you guys are selling some wines. And thank you guys both for joining me. And we will see you soon, hopefully in person. So
yeah, right. Take care. Good to see you, Greg. Matt, take care.
See you, Ken.
Yep. I got the